Okay. Um, First of all, I wanted to thank Mr. Zappa for coming here this afternoon, taking the time out of his schedule. And I want to thank Herb Cohen and the other people connected with his company. Mr. Zappa is going to delve into his music and how he creates it, record production, composing and arranging, and possibly some of his experiences as a filmmaker and producer of soundtracks. Along with Mr. Zappa, there are two members of his group, the Mothers of Invention, Captain Beefheart and George Duke. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Frank Zappa.
Hello, boys and girls. All right, can you turn this up just a little bit because I don't talk very loud. Besides that, we did a thing on stage the other night with a pillow, and we dismantled this pillow, and large quantities of feathers were strewn about in the air, and they remained in circulation for approximately 2 hours, and a number of them have settled in my lung. So I don't want to make you feel sorry for me or anything, but I'm hurting, folks. So, Mr. Krantz, where's the coffee?
It's coming. It's coming in about 2 seconds.
Oh, okay. Well, I have this letter here. I'll read to you the letter that I received about this event so you can see where it's all at, okay? It says, I am in receipt of your letter of March 28, 1975 regarding Frank Zappa. Mr. Zappa will be available to speak to the students from 12 noon till 2 p.m. Wednesday, April 23, 1975 in Gifford Auditorium. He'll be prepared to speak on the following subjects: his music and how he creates it, record producing, composing, arranging, his experience as filmmaker and producer of soundtrack. I will underline the part that he will be prepared to speak on the following subject. Now this, he will not really be prepared to speak on those subjects because he never does this kind of thing, but luckily I have the letter here which has the list, which will remind me of the things that I'm supposed to talk about. So I'll begin with subject number 1, his music and how he creates it. Well, when I first met Frank and he was working on his music, well, see, it all started a long time ago. See, when I was little, my family was really poor. Not only that, they didn't like music too much, see, so I didn't really come into contact with anything that resembled musical expression until I was about 14 or 15 years old, which is when I got to hear some of it on the radio. I remember riding around in a car, and by accident, while somebody was turning the station, we came across some oddball little station out in Chino, California that was playing a record called I by the Velvets. Has anybody ever heard I by the Velvets? Of course you haven't. That was a long time ago. Look here. They were playing I by the Velvets, and I said, "What was that?" And my father says, "No, turn it away. Don't listen to that." And then that gave me the first inkling that there was something interesting about to happen in the world. Then about a week later, I heard, I went looking for that same radio station where the weird music was coming out of, and I managed to hear another record called Riot in Cell Block Number 9 by the Robins. And then proceeded to go to a place that actually sold records. I'd never been to a record store before. I thought that was a good place to start, and went in there. And in those days, you could take a record into the little room and listen to it before you bought it. So I snatched up Work With Me, Annie, and 2 or 3 other Joe Houston record, and went in and listened to it, and I was hooked. There was only one problem. I didn't have a record player. It took me a year to convince my parents that they should purchase a record player. When they finally got one, it was, I'll describe it to you. It looked like this. and it had little fake wrought iron legs this big. I believe it was a Deca, and it had these little legs in the bottom, so it elevated it off the table about that much because the speaker was in the bottom. And it had one big needle, osmium tip job. Remember the osmium tip? And it was capable of the playing of 78 RPM records, which they provided us with one free record with the record player. The name of the song was The Little Shoemaker. And my mother used to play that while she was ironing. It was the only record that she liked. And there was they were very opposed to uh, any involvement in music that I might be interested in. That they just thought that was not a good thing for an Italian sort of a person to be doing when you could probably make a better living if you went into science or engineering or something intelligent. So when I wanted to listen to music, I had to unplug the record player from near the ironing board and take it in the bedroom and listen to other things. Well, that got me working on music, and from listening to it for about 2 years, I decided I would start writing it. And I started writing when I was about 14, and still writing today. I'm 34, and that takes care of topic number one. Record producing. Okay, what is record producing? Well, folks, if you're an artist, that is the person who has signed the contract with the record company, chances are that I would say 9 out of 10 times you do not know how to operate the equipment that is in a recording studio. And what a producer ideally should do is run the interference between you and the engineer, you being the person who's making the music, and the engineer being the person who pays strict attention to the operation of the machines involved. The producer's job is to make decisions like how loud should the drums be in the mix? Should you put echo on the voice? And things like that. He is also the person who has to watch the budget of the recording session, because he's the one who knows that if you're budgeted to spend $25,000 on an album, which is about an average figure that they spend these days, that if you're spending more than 3 or 4 days on recording sessions, that you're going to be in trouble by the time you start mixing. And he has to keep track of details like that. If he's a producer who is employed by a record company, he has to provide financial reports to that record company and do a bunch of grubby paperwork and so on and so forth. And he is also entrusted with the job of sort of babysitting a group. If you've got a group that is a brand new group and they're going in the studio for the first time, a lot of times they have mysterious ideas about what a record contract is, what a recording studio is, and what they're supposed to do once they get in there. And the producer's job is to keep them sane during the time that they're actually making the record, because having produced some other first-time groups myself, it is very difficult. You have to, it's worthy of a degree in psychology if you can get through with a session with a new group and the group is still together by the time they've made their first record. Another thing that a record producer will do is, if he's an independent, he may be brought in to completely package a group or work on a concept album with a group. Let's see, who is the guy that might do that right now? Who's that guy that produced Carly Simon that has the big teeth? Yeah, Richard Perry. He's one of those kind of guys. He gets a lot of money to go in and take an artist, probably an established artist, and work up a whole concept around that artist. And usually to do this, he is given somewhat unlimited funds by a record company. So it's not too hard when you get to that echelon of record production. Next topic, composing and arranging. I don't know what to say about composing and arranging, because I don't know whether I'm talking to music students or people who just came down here to say hello, or, because you're getting in a technical. Well, I tell you, what I'd rather do about composing and arranging is I'll accept questions on that and answer individual things there. and move on to experience as a filmmaker and producer of soundtracks. This is the story of producing 200 Motels. I've been working on the music for this film for about 5 years. I've been writing it while we were traveling around. And I used to take bundles of music paper in my suitcase, and when we get to a hotel after a concert, I would go back and I would write music, and because there was nothing to do. And those were the days. Well, I had collected about 200 or 300 pages of orchestra manuscript from that 5-year period. And I was looking for some sort of an event that would give me a chance to hear the music played and to visualize the storyline that I thought was going along with the music. And so, after some intense negotiations, we convinced United Artists to put up the money to do the first feature-length videotape motion picture. Total budget of the film was $679,000. Nobody had ever made a feature-length video production before. The process was unusual in that we were doing it in England, and their video system is different than what we have in the United States. They use a 625-line system. I don't know whether that means anything to you, but it's a higher resolution system, and the way in which the color is printed onto the tape differs from the way that the color is printed on the tape here. And this difference makes it possible to extract the 3 primary colors one at a time, and by coupling that with the old Technicolor triple negative process to make a print from a videotape that has better color than you would get making a transfer off an American videotape. Get the picture? Okay. So, after having them agree that they were going to invest this amount of money to put something on the screen that nobody had thought of trying before, the next problem was keeping them out of the way while we worked on it. Because anytime somebody has money invested in a film, there's always the temptation that they want to come down there and watch you spend it. And we were very fortunate in having some people at United Artists who were smart enough to stay home while we were working on the movie, so we didn't have too much interference. The only problems we had working on the film were these factors. There was an exact shooting schedule above which we could not proceed more than 1 minute because the cost of shooting with about 150 people on the stage is exorbitant. And so the film was shot in exactly 7 8-hour days. And that's to the minute, including 2 tea breaks per day, because when you work in England, it is not funny. They do take tea breaks. The world stops, and a lady with a green smock comes around with a wagon, and and we were on stage A, which was the same stage where they shot the special effects for 2001, and we had 120 people in the orchestra and about 30 other actors and dancers and assorted whatnots. And the minute tea break came, all 150 people had to get tea, and you had 15 minutes to do it, you know. So that meant that although the tea break would commence on time, it was very difficult to get everybody back in their place at the end of 15 minutes, so that our little tea breaks tended to drag over, and the cumulative effect of tea breaks throughout the week probably cost us 4 to 5 hours of production time. So watch out for that if you ever work in England. And the other thing is, because I was crazy and continue to be crazy about certain things in production, I insisted that the orchestra actually be performing on screen instead of pretending to play to a pre-recorded track. This gave me the chance to have absolute synchronization on film. I hate to see a film where the sync is funny, where the mouth doesn't move exactly right, or where somebody's supposed to be playing an instrument and their fingers aren't doing what they're supposed to do. That bothers me. And so we had the orchestra actually playing. Now, this is something that hasn't been done in a film since about 1930 in a musical. And I sure did find out why the hard way. So if you ever get a chance to do a musical, pre-record the tracks. And let's see, what else can I tell you about film production? Okay, then after we had shot the thing, it was 110 hours, that's 11 10-hour days of videotape edit, after which it was transferred to film, and then a total of 3 months in post-production. That includes dubbing in sound effects, shortening the total thing from about 2 hours and 20 minutes down to its eventual running time, about 108, and final post-dubbing process where you combine all the music tracks, the dialogue tracks, and the sound effect tracks to put it all together. Then your only problem, if you're the person who is responsible for putting the film together, is going through all the drudgery of trying to deal with the people at the film company who are going to promote it and how they're going to advertise it. We did have a lot of trouble in this regard with 200 Motels. You see, right next door to us at the soundstage where we're working on 200 Motels, they were filming Fiddler on the Roof. Now, Fiddler on the Roof cost about $22 million, so they wanted to get their money back in a hurry. And when our little cheap movie came out at the same time as that, we had a lot of difficulty getting them to pay attention to it, you know? So they tried to rely on certain procedures that had been standard in the industry for about 30 years. You know, like they would send out mimeograph notices to newspapers saying that rock star Frank Zappa will be arriving at the airport at such and such a time. We're sure you're going to want to go down there and meet him, and all this kind of stuff. Really old-time Hollywood swill, you know. And we had a lot of trouble convincing them to make the right kind of commercials and put up the right kind of print advertising for the thing. But the biggest problem that you're ever going to encounter if you work on a film is getting paid for it later. Now here, the danger there is that major film companies who are frequently willing to put up investment money for new film projects are never willing to give you an accurate accounting of what the film did when it's gone into distribution. They have so many ways of charging things against that film's account that it's absolutely amazing. You'll wind up spending the latter part of your life with accountants and lawyers trying to decipher what really happened when the thing went into a theater. As far as 200 Motels goes, we still have not received an accounting, and the thing was done in 1971, I believe. Still have not received an accounting of whether it went into a profit situation or anything. You know, they just sort of lose contact with you after the first 3 months that the film is in the running, and anything you want to find out after that has all got to go through legal channels. And so now that I've blabbed for about 10 or 15 minutes, let's have questions and answers, and I turn it over to Mr. Krantz.
Okay, Jan? Jan? Okay. Will the people who are handling the mics for the questions and answers in the aisles, where are you? Would you raise your hands? Okay. In the center aisle? Oh. Is that you? Oh.
Test.
Okay. Okay. Right here, please. Okay.
Mr. Zappa, could you explain the fight that went on between Verve and Capitol Records for Lumpy Gravy?
Sure, it works like this. And now, I got to explain to you how Lumpy Gravy was made in the first place. In 1966, a guy who was a staff producer at Capitol Records named Nick Benet came to me and he said, how would you like to do some music with an orchestra? And I said, an orchestra? Why, that would be wonderful. He says, yeah, 40 pieces. And I said, wow, what a wonderful large orchestra. It just so happened, though, at that time I was under contract to Verve, and so the question came up, was I under contract as a composer and conductor? And I said, no, I was signed as a rock and roll musician who was a singer in a group. And he presumed, and I thought that he would have checked it with his legal department, that it would be okay to go ahead and produce such a record and that there wouldn't be any problems about it. So we went ahead and did it, and the next thing we knew, there were problems about it. And so they argued for 13 months. It took, from the time that the album was done to the time it came out, was 13 months. And they finally settled it by Verve purchasing it outright from Capitol.
Okay. Yes. Right over there, please.
I have a couple of questions dealing with some more technical aspects of the music.
I could tell by your beret.
Thank you. The first one deals with doubling on instruments. That's something I tried to do with some success for several years, but eventually the technical problems involved, just keeping up the contrasting techniques on all the instruments forced me to choose one instrument to be my main thing. And I just pick up some of the others occasionally. And I know that you yourself have done some doubling, and you've worked with Ian Underwood, who I was very inspired by for quite a while. And I was wondering how someone goes about doing that.
Doing what?
Playing, I'll say 7 or 8 instruments with a fair degree of proficiency.
What happens in the Los Angeles studios is a lot of the woodwind players double an enormous quantity of instruments, and they keep it going by practicing all of them all the time and by being employed all the time and being forced to use that skill. I mean, there are maybe 20 or 30 guys in the LA studio business that play more than 10 instruments and play them well and read good and everything.
This generally works then with wind players rather than...
Well, there's some
others.
brass players who double, but mostly it's the wind players that double. George doubles a vast amount of keyboard instruments, but usually you find that, well, there is a new breed of keyboard player coming up today that knows a lot about synthesizers. Sometimes it's hard for a person who has just straight classical piano chops to make the concept switch from a normal keyboard to operating knobs and dials and stuff. But usually you'll find that the doubling instruments are going to be people who play winds, people who play percussion, people who play keyboards.
So it's generally one class of instrument rather than, say playing 1 or 2 wind instruments and a keyboard and something like that.
Well, I'll tell you about a guy I know that was working with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and I can't remember who he's working with now. He's that drummer. He's working with Billy Cobham now. His name is Tom Malone, and he was in my group at one time. He has the weirdest assortment of doubles I ever heard of. Piccolo trumpet, tuba, tenor saxophone, alto flute, electric bass, and normal trumpet. So if you stop and think of what you have to do embouchure-wise to switch from playing a tuba to an alto flute to a piccolo trumpet, and he was good on all those instruments. He was just an absolute freak.
So it's not really done that often, in other words.
No, it's not.
And my second question is about rehearsal techniques, putting a group together. Like in the past, you've worked with people who had limited amount of experience with the kind of music you were trying to do. And I was wondering how you exposed them to the some of the complicated arrangements or rhythms that you were working with, and any special ways you rehearsed the group.
I would say the normal procedure for rehearsal involves memory drill. It's just, you just keep doing it over and over again. If you don't understand it the first time, you keep doing it just like a parrot until you learn it. And then sometimes you understand it and sometimes you don't understand it, but the net result is that you learn it. I stopped worrying long ago about whether or not the people who are in the band actually understand what they're playing. As a matter of fact, there were times when I thought they did, and I was absolutely wrong. So I guess it doesn't matter so long as they learn it.
Yes, right here.
Frank, could I have some specific examples about the problems you have in dealing with producing a new group, like you mentioned, psychological hassles or whatever?
Okay, here's what happens. You get a group in, and everybody in the group is, they're all hot to trot because they just got a record contract. And immediately they think, aha, stardom. And they're already spending their royalties before they've even sold a record, and they're talking about what kind of car they're going to get and where they're going to move and the new clothes they're going to get and wait till we go to England and all that kind of stuff. And so with that sort of thing happening to their, it's like visions of sugar plums dancing in their head, and then they come into the studio and the producer's got to be the guy that says, okay, the session has just started, now let's make a record, And so once they've actually managed to lay down their first track, they come in and they listen to it back in the console room. And the drummer will say, I can't hear enough drums. And the singer will say, I can't hear my voice. And the guitar player will say, turn me up. And the bass player says, where's the bass? And then they'll go on like that. And then you have to say, well, it's just a playback. It's not the final mix, Just go back out there and... and it's like that, to the nth degree.
Does it seem to be a real bring down when they find out they have maybe 1/10 the artistic control they thought they might have when they were signed?
Well, what do you mean by artistic control?
Well, they do all these songs, they think of their best songs, and they think they're really great, and then you say, well, this isn't going to sell, or this song is too long, it's got to be cut for 2 minutes because it'll make a good single, or whatever the hell, or...
Well, the matter of artistic control is something that's usually specified in their contract. It just depends on what kind of a deal they've made. There are some groups who do not generate any of their own material. There's some groups who can play good and sing good and wind up doing, material that is brought to them either by the producer or by a publisher or something like that. And there are varying degrees of artistic control, up to and including control over the artwork on the cover. It just depends on what their deal is at the time they sign. But George can expound on that. Why don't you tell him about your record contract, George?
You don't want to hear about it.
Go on, tell him. No, tell him, really.
Well, if you really want to hear about it, I tell you, it's my contract is with a small company, and I have complete artistic control as far as the music goes, but that's it. As far as the contractual obligations to the company to me go, that's about as far as it goes. In other words, they can do whatever they want with the cover, and I have nothing to say about it. They can put whatever they want out, get any artist to do it. I don't even have to see it. They can put it out. Nothing about it.
Now, how did that happen?
Well, it wasn't in the contract. You see, when I went to Mutt, no. No, it's just something that I overlooked, I guess. I didn't think it was that important. And I guess my lawyer overlooked it, too, because it wasn't in there.
Yes, right back there, please.
I was wondering if you could, this concerns your music, if you could just give a general summary of what inspired you to create the music that you create, how it differs.
A general summary of about...
Well, a general, what inspired you to get into what you do.
Well, if I had to bring it down to a general summary, I would say that the music that I do is made from things that have either happened to me or that I've seen happening to other people that I think are worthy of commemoration. An example would be in the Fillmore East album, the business about the girl who won't take her pants off unless the guy sings his hit single. It's a true story. And in fact, a lot of the things are true stories. That actually happened to Howard when he was in the Turtles. And when he first told me about it, I thought it was pretty funny. And so I wrote this piece for Mark and Howard so that they could relive their past experience night after night for a larger audience. And there are other things that I've done that relate to personal matters that are so obscure, that couldn't even be deciphered, but they still provide the idea for a song.
Okay. Okay, right in back of you. Okay? Right there.
Yeah, I have a question for Captain Beefheart. Are you there?
What a silly question.
Take me with you when you go, man.
I was just wondering why, in relation to your past albums, the latest one is so much more commercial.
Well,
Tell them about your record contract, John.
I sign with a Gatling pen, with no conscience. I went into Mercury Records, and I took the guy's shoe off and pulled his sock off, and he didn't have little wings. But he was fast without them. So they took Wingdale Fingerling off the record, the drummer, everything, and ran me out of town. Said that they would do the album when I got back. And they had. But I hadn't gotten back.
Any more questions?
This is a... Ready? Here I am. Hi. How's it going? This question for you. Is the early music or is the music that you first put on records the music to which you were aspiring at the time, or would you have rather done a different kind of music like the orchestral stuff you did in 200 Motels, like Varese kind of stuff?
Well, I have a wide range of musical interest, and I'm interested in all those things at the same time. But the music that comes on a record is usually the direct product of the people that are available to play in the band at that time. Like, for instance, all the early albums would have sounded completely different even if I would have done the same songs, so the same vocals and everything else, if I would have had different people playing the instruments. You know, because what I was asking of them instrumentally was so weird for that day and age, you know, that I don't think that it came off as good as it should have. But I would have been just as happy writing for an orchestra and getting it played, but nobody wanted to give me an orchestra until Lumpy Gravy. See, because orchestras happen to cost a lot of money.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, right there.
Well, I'm talking about your orchestration. I noticed during your concerts you lead your band, you know, like an orchestra leader would, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, why do you do that? You know, how come you have like such total tight control over your you know, band?
Well, if I give a hand signal, the net result is to keep everybody together. You know, on stage, I don't know how much experience you had on a stage and know what the difference is in the sound on a stage as opposed to what's in the audience, but there are times where you can't tell what is going on a stage. You can't hear the drums, which means you can't hear the beat. You can't hear your vocal because the monitor is not as loud as the speakers that are going out toward the front. And it's a combination of guesswork and, you know, radar that gets you through a show. And so if I'm giving a cue, you know, a visual representation of this is the downbeat, then it helps to keep everybody together under those circumstances. And there are other times where if you want to put a cello rondo or a retard into a piece of music, the only way that you can keep the group together is by indicating how the rate at which the music is speeding up or slowing down. So that's why you conduct it. And then I have other hand signals which are used to make punctuation and just sound effects. For instance, if I go like this, that means get ready. And when I go like that, everybody goes grunt and hits a low note. And that's a cutoff, see, which will stop the whole band and leave one soloist just playing by himself. Or if I stick my hand out like that and reach around, that means get ready. And then I go like this and I pull. That means figure out any note that you like and play any note that you want, and then increase the volume as I go like this. And that result is, you know, it's different every time you do it, but it's a texture, you know, it's a textural kind of a thing. you can see how that would contrast against a straight beat. Beat is going on like this, and you suddenly go like that, you know, just something to stick in there to make your eyebrows go up and down. And then there's this signal. I go like this. That means get ready, and then I go like that. And then everybody is supposed to play the highest note that they have on their instrument. And there are variations on that. There's this one that goes doot, a little one. Then there's a big one, and there's the one that goes doot.
No, the young lady there, please. Right behind you, the young lady there.
I love your shirt.
You what?
I love your shirt.
What'd you say?
I love your shirt.
You like my shirt?
Yes.
Why? Because it looks like your shirt?
Yes.
Hey.
I understand that you score all of your music, all of it's precisely written out. Yes. Do you... That's the lead-in. That's the lead-in. Do you ever do any improvisation?
Of course.
On stage?
Yeah, on stage, yeah. See, because you write something out or that you plan events doesn't mean that 100% of everything you do is planned. You can plan a structure, you can plan the front, the back, and one piece in the middle and leave all the rest of it to chance. Eventually, can you bring the microphone down here and get this girl who's squirming in the front? Okay.
Could you tell us what inspired you to do Camarillo Brillo, the song on...
Camarillo Brillo? Well, there's a certain kind of girl in California that they have them some places in New York too, easy there, that has this, it's like cartoon hair that goes rain like that. You know those kind of girls? Yeah, well, I always thought that those kind of girls needed to be commemorated, you know. There's a certain, because the way pop culture is constructed, the way dress fads come and go, and the way hairstyles come and go, and so on and so forth, if you don't make a little note of it while it's going by, then it'll be lost to the ages. And 100 years from now, somebody will get that record and say, Camarillo Brillo, what does that mean, you know? But you'll know, see. Hey, you got the microphone!
Yeah. I really love this. This is beautiful. But I want to know your plans for the future.
Well, you see this?
Great. It's beautiful.
That's one of my plans for the future.
No, really.
That's it. I'm going to grow this. It's going to get... You know what I mean?
No.
You don't? Well, I'll tell you later.
Okay. Promise?
Yeah. Such a deal. What?
Hi there. How do you do? I've had a lot of respect for all your albums, even including Overnight Sensation and Apostrophe, but I kind of lost it for Roxy, and I was wondering what you think of Roxy.
Well, I like it, or I wouldn't have put it out. You know.
Like, do you think that it's as good as some of the other stuff you do?
Sure.
Okay. And then I have one more question. Who do you enjoy listening to most? What group?
I don't listen to pop music.
Can you tell us if anything is going on with your Live at the Roxy movie?
Well, I wish there was. The status of that film is this. I spent about $30,000 or $40,000 trying to get the thing on film, and I've got it on film, and there are some things that happened down there that were absolutely fabulous. However, they're too weird to show on television, and I don't think that there's really a market in the theaters for a straight concert film like that, you know. So it just, right now, is sitting on my shelf, being an expensive piece of home movie fare. Maybe one day when TV loosens up a little bit, we'll be able to show the lovely Brenda doing her. That was a real nice piece of film, that Brenda.
Okay. Frank, over here. Over here.
Hey.
Hi. I was wondering how you and Don got it together to be in the same band. That was a surprise.
Well, why don't you ask Don?
Don, could you tell me how you got together with Frank? in the Mothers last night.
Well. Well.
Please,
Well.
please.
I'll go and tell him, Don.
All right.
Don't spare me.
I just came down.
Here or there? I understand.
Ah. Just here and there.
Good.
And there and here. And here.
Anybody else know?
Who asked me that question? Where are you?
Hey, Frank.
Hey.
It's about time. Yeah, I want to ask you a little different sort of question.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
It's about, the press and stuff like that. Like, you read a lot of weird things about yourself and stuff. Like, there's one article that came out in something like Syracuse or something. This really weird sort of guy interviewed you about what you wore. How did you handle that? I mean, do you...
Well, you see, it's hard for me to assume responsibility for the skill and interest of people who write about me, People come to me and they say, I want to do an interview, and I say, okay, go ahead,
Wow.
And they ask me questions, and I just take my chances with the questions that they ask me. And if they're stupid, that's my tough luck, And if they're intelligent, that's also my tough luck. But, fortunately, I don't run into that very often. Most of the people that I've talked with from the world of the printed page are, they're not too suave,
Yeah.
They're first of all, they're not good writers. Second of all, they're not good interviewers. And third of all, they're doing it because it's a job. So, I'm not trying to make their lives miserable. That's their job. They come out and they talk to me and they talk to somebody else, and it goes on and on and on. I just do the best I can with what's asked.
Do you still have, any animosity toward, David Wally and his biography? And all of
I
that?
wouldn't say that it's animosity, but I wouldn't say that it's too enthralling either, because I think that it's a bad piece of work, and I hate to see my name connected with it. I asked him not to write the book because I didn't think that he could do a good job on it, and he said that he had already had a contract to do the book and that he was going to go ahead with it whether I cooperated or not. And so it puts you in a position where somebody is going to write a story of your life, You don't think that they can do it, and there's no way you can stop them from doing it. And so you have a choice. You can either not talk to him anymore, or you can give him some interviews and try and give him some information that he can use. But what happened at the time that Wally interviewed me was he would come over to my house, and he'd ask me a question, and I'd go to answer it, and then he would start talking about his father. And I spent 2 or 3 nights listening to him tell me about how his father sent him to military school, and him comparing me with his father, and I'm going, Jesus! And then he would do numbers like he'd bring his girlfriend over to my house with licks like, yeah, I'm going up to interview Frank Zappa, I want to come along and all that kind of shit. And so I'd sit there and go, And then when he had finally finished the book, he sent me the galley proofs, which, what a galley proof is. That's the book before it's a book, except that it wasn't. He sent me some printed pages, but there was already 10,000 finished books sitting in a warehouse someplace, and there's no way that I could have corrected any of his errors, And so it was just an unfortunate thing that happens to somebody in show business. And when you're in show business and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I'm going to do a book about your life, you just tell them, go fuck yourself.
Oh, Frank? Hello?
He's over there.
Right here.
Hey.
Before you mentioned aspect of chance in your music, how much, or if any, do you have looked at anything?
Show business. And when you're in show business and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I'm going to do a book about your life, you just tell them, go fuck yourself.
Oh, Frank?
Hello?
He's over there.
Right here.
Hey.
Before you mentioned aspect of chance in your music, how much, or if any, do you have looked at anything as far as what John Cage has been dealing with, or also have you had any experience with a group of artists in New York by the name of Fluxus?
Well, I've heard of Fluxus, and I've listened to John Cage's albums, and I attended a couple of John Cage lectures, and I did some research into that kind of aleatoric music and studied other aleatoric composers during the late 50s when that was turning into something to be reckoned with. But there's very few of those people that I thought did anything that sounded musical. You know, it was interesting, but I wouldn't compare it to any lasting musical expression. You know, it was just a sign of the times, and it was worthy as such. And if I listen to any of those records today, I just hear it as an indicator and not as a piece of music. Like the Bartok Second Piano Concerto is a piece of music, and John Cage's music for two prepared pianos and a something or other is, you know, that doesn't register as music with me.
You find that to be the case of most aleatoric music?
It depends on the piece. There have been some pieces that contain improvisation that I've enjoyed. A couple of Earl Brown's pieces I like, and what's that guy's name? Donald Erb.
Yeah, Donald.
Yeah. You know that record? Yeah, I like that. But most of the earlier things in the aleatoric vein were not too. Well, I'll tell you part of the problem. Whenever a composer relinquishes part of his control to a musician and says, okay, just fill in the blanks here, I'll trust your judgment, he's putting an awful lot of faith in somebody who may or may not be too interested in what his musical goals are. Whenever you're writing a piece of music and you say, this space is for you to fill out with an improvisation, you're really taking a lot of chances. And because of the attitude of most symphony musicians, or most of the people who were playing those early aleatoric pieces, they hated what they were doing. And I think that comes through in the recordings of that music very strongly, that the people who were playing that stuff just couldn't stand it, didn't understand what the idea was behind improvisation. And a lot of people who play in symphony orchestras have never been asked to improvise before, so they're very uncomfortable with it. And it's possible that some of that music might turn out to be better if it was recorded now with people who understand that kind of improvisation.
Yes, there's a question back here.
Well, first I want to thank George for the peanuts because I haven't eaten all day. Frank, I want to know, how much did it cost to put Apostrophe together, and how long did it take?
It took approximately 2.5 years on and off, because that's the span that the pieces cover in there, and the total budget was $65,000.
Frank, I want to know if you are the guitarist who's on George Duke's Feel album.
Say that again, please.
Are you the guitarist who's on George Duke's Feel album?
No, that's Abdul X.
Okay.
Frank, I wonder if you could, Frank? Over here. I wonder if you can enumerate on some of the recordings that you did pre-Freak Out. I know there were some singles under other names, and I wonder if you could go into some of those.
Well, let's see. There was The Big Surfer, which I wrote and arranged, and it was performed by some other people. And then there was World's Greatest Sinner, which was my group with Ray Collins doing the lead vocal under the name of Baby Ray and the Ferns. And there was Memories of El Monte, which Ray and I wrote, that was performed by the Penguins. There was Grunion Run, which I played most of the tracks on, which was the flip side of a record called Tijuana Surf. It was also released by Original Sound. And there's about 3 or 4 others. I can't remember. Well, Big Leg Emma was not pre-Freak Out. That was done 1966. It was done at the same time as the recording sessions for Absolutely Free.
Yeah. Yes. I have 2 questions for George Duke. I'm over here. Okay. George,
yeah.
I have you performing with Cannonball Adderley on the Black Messiah. I have you performing Gerald Wilson Orchestra
Yeah.
I have Reflections and Feel. Now, other than as a member of the Mothers, what other LPs can I find you on?
Other than, what did you
Other
say?
than the four that I named, and as a member of the Mothers.
I still don't understand the question. Other than
Are
what?
you on any other LPs?
Am I on any other records? Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Could I
You want to know what they
get
are?
a clue? Yes.
That's out. Yeah, I'm on a Billy Cobham album called, what's the name of that thing? Yeah, I forgot the name of it. It's the second album of his. Crosswinds, yeah. I'm on that, and I'm on a Louis Gasca album called Barn Free or something. I don't know the name of half of these records. I'm on, if you, Flora Pudding, I'm on a couple of her albums, Stories to Tell, and one Butterfly Dreams. And I could go on, I could take up a half hour with the list of records I do with other people, by your toll.
Okay. Last question is, could I get some brief history of George Duke? I mean, what inspired you, your style of play?
Ugh. Ugh. Okay, well, my piano teacher. Well, when I was 7, my mother took me to see Duke Ellington. I guess I was about 5, and that inspired me. I said, I can do that. And I was crazy, though, at the moment. I sat down, and my mother bought me a little piano, and I started practicing. And I used to walk up the hill once a week to take lessons from this little lady that lived up on the hill in the ghetto. And I did that for like 3 years. And but who inspired me? Probably the first record that really sent me somewhere else was I heard a James Brown record, The Famous Flames. That really put me out. What was the name of it? It was Think. You know what? Yeah, there was some in there. Anyway, there was that, and then I heard a Miles Davis record, Kind of Blue. That put me somewhere else. And I said, I couldn't play like that. The only thing I could do is play, and I don't mean to demean this guy in any way, because I love this cat, man. His name's Les McCann. I could get into that, you know, but I wanted to play more in the style of what Miles was doing at the time, so I went into that sort of thing. You know, I don't want to take too long with this, but I went to school and I studied all this classical music and, you know, got my degrees and all that, and but I wanted to play some music which involved some improvisation. And I love the blues.
Yeah.
She heard my cry.
I read somewhere about 5 or 6 years ago that you had made a film that was going to be 12 hours long or 6 hours long or something like that. I was wondering, first of all, if that was just a put on or whether you had something like that.
Just remember, don't believe anything you read in the papers.
Yeah, I read it in the papers. Yeah.
That was in Random Notes in Rolling Stone.
You got
and
it.
it was a joke. And I had nothing to do with it.
Okay, and secondly, when you made 200 Motels, when you cut that, did you transfer it to film and then cut it down on film?
The first editing was done in the videotape stage. A lot of the opticals that you see in there were done in post-production. And then after it was the complete videotape, one reel of videotape was done. Pardon me. They transferred that to 35 millimeter, and we got a black and white work print, and then cut the work print down and laid the sound effects in against the work print.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to ask 2 questions. What is the breakdown now of percentages for a group, the group, and a producer and a record company from a record?
What do you mean? Breakdown percentages.
What does the producer get and what does the entertainer get or the artist get?
It varies from group to group, company to company. Every contract is individually negotiable.
Oh, so it's not a general form anymore. You can negotiate whatever you want or whatever you can get.
That's right. It's whatever you can get.
Okay, and what is the best route for a new artist to take to find a producer, to do his own demo, or to just knock on doors or whatever you want to say?
Well, it always comes down to knocking on doors, whether you're looking for a producer or you're trying to find some money to make a demo. It's always knocking on a door.
Yeah.
But
is there a better route, though, to take?
Unfortunately, there isn't, you know, because since the pop business became such a huge industry, and every time you turn around, there's another band that wants to do something, and they're not all good, and they're not all really worth recording, but each and every one of them believes that he's entitled to his shot, and of course he is. And the problem that a record company has is they can only record so many artists at one time, and after they recorded them, they have a big problem of getting those things into a store. Like, I'll give you an example. Warner Brothers, their last album release, which they do a mass release every 6 weeks, there was 44 LPs in their release alone for that period of time, and every other record company has got a similar large amount of albums. So, you know, there's tons of stuff coming out all the time, and a record store, especially in the current economic slump, is not going to take a chance as readily on a group that he's never heard before, that is not promoting in his town, or, you know, not doing concerts or something like that. He's not enthusiastic about taking a bunch of these new albums from a new group from the distributor and putting it in his store, because he has limited shelf space, you know. He's only got so many little places on the wall where he can show albums, and he wants to show the albums that are going to bring him a profit in his store. So all this keeps reflecting back to the record company. The group comes to the company, and they say, we have some songs, you know, record us, and, you know, they're really not enthusiastic about even listening, so it's hard to just get them to pay attention to you. The best way, I think, would be to get your group together and play in an area that has a number of clubs where you can get exposure and build up a strong local following. And then based on activity in a certain area, like if you're playing in a club in this town, I don't know what the club situation is like here, but
There are none.
There aren't any?
There are none.
Well, there are certain towns in the States where there is a lot of club action, you know, and that seems to be the way a scene gets to happen, like San Francisco. I mean, when San Francisco cut loose, there were a lot of places for groups to play, and when there are places for groups to play, there'll be a lot of groups, and there'll also be good groups just because the odds go up, you know, and so people get to play and develop their skills, and good things happen. So, you know, move to a place where there is a chance for you to play. Get in there and play, and when people notice you and like you and follow your group from place to place, then you can believe that there are people from record companies who go into those areas and check it out and see who's doing things. I mean, that's what happened recently in Austin, Texas. That's why it's turning into something down there. There's a lot of groups happening, and people started checking it out, and they got contracts.
Hi, Frank.
Hiya.
Where are the Underwoods, and what are they doing musically now?
Well, let's see. Ruth is, at last, I got a letter from her about 6 weeks ago. She was living with her mother in Long Island, and Ian is working in Los Angeles in the studios playing synthesizer on a lot of film scores. They had some marital problems. I do not know how they're being resolved, and musically, Ruth is not doing too much, and I already told you what Ian was doing.
Ian's on Freddie Hubbard's last album, too. By the way.
Is there going to be a combined effort of, will there be committed to vinyl some Beefheart and Zappa, and like, is there another Hot Rats in your system?
Well, my system is full of hot rats at all times.
Good.
Yeah, and also some feathers, as he pointed out. Yeah, there will probably be a combination FZCB album, yes.
Are you at all interested in doing stuff for quadraphonic reproduction, or is that at a total dead standstill right now?
Well, let's see, Overnight Sensation,
And
Apostrophe, and Roxy are all available in quad. The new album, which we have coming out in June, is not going to be available in quad, because I just didn't have time to mix it in quad. But the 2-track mix of it is absolutely fab. So.
This is directed to the captain.
Captain?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your Trout Mask Replica album. And also specifically what inspired the Old Farted play.
The old fart.
Right.
Not working.
Right, well,
Where are you, man?
I'm right here.
Ah! It's a nice painting, but I couldn't see who was moving.
Well, could you talk some about the album? What went into making it? And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I have the notes. Why, when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, this black juice came out on a hard-shelled chin, and they call that tobacco juice. I used to fiddle with my back feet. Music for a black onyx. My tar room absorbed every echo. The music was thud-like. Thud-like. I usually played such things as roughneck and thug. Opaque melodies that would bug most people. The music was thud-like. Thud-like. Music from the other side of the fence. A black swan figurine lay on all-colored lily pads on a little conglomeration table of pressed black felt with same-colored shadows and sieve-knob knees and
Thud-like. The silence was
and
thud-like.
whatnot. The long hallway rolled out into odd beside the fly-pecked black doorway that looked closed on a tar lattice street.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Frank how he liked working with Jack Bruce, and do you think you'll ever get back playing with him again?
Well, it was an interesting experience, and we probably will not work together anymore. What was wrong with it? Nothing. Nothing at all, you know. It's just that, is he? He is? He's in jail? Well, see what I know about this stuff? George says he's in jail all the time, so that makes it tough.
Yeah, I was wondering what's involved, like with guest artists on albums. Like when, you know, if they have in the back of an album, like Shuggy Otis appears courtesy of, like, Sleazy Records. Does that mean that he's really appearing courtesy of Sleazy, or are they taking, like, a cut of that album? Or, like, how does that whole thing work with guest artists?
They don't take a cut. In fact, up until recently, some record companies wouldn't allow their artists to be on other labels. Columbia had a policy for years where, I mean, I'd tried for a number of years to do an album with Jeff Beck. We discussed it about, 5 or 6 different times, but because he's signed with Epic, and that's part of Columbia, they would never let him do anything like that, and so, it could just never come off. But the tendency in the business today is to let things like that let it slide. They don't take a cut of the artist's share. They just make you put the record company name on the back of the jacket.
I'd like to know what it was like working with Wildman Fisher, and what's he doing today?
Well, it was hell working with Wildman Fisher. I spent 3 months working, sort of like working for Wildman Fisher at the time I was putting his album together. And right now he is walking around the streets of Los Angeles with his album under his arm, still punching people.
In regards to the show last night at the War Memorial, you used the panning effect from side to side a lot. I was wondering, was that being controlled by the soundboard?
By the mixer.
Or the mixing?
Yeah.
Both on the guitar and on the drums?
Yeah. All
Thank
the
you.
panning happens from the board.
Okay, thank you.
And right there.
Yeah, I just like to say something. I don't know how it's going to come off, but like when I was a freshman in high school, right, I see your albums on the rack, and I said, yeah, who's this weird motherfucker, you know?
Well, I can hardly blame you.
Yeah, well, you know. All right, and
I said the same thing when I saw your albums out there.
right, but all right, then supposedly I got a little older and I started playing, you know. Supposedly I became a musician. And I would like to say that after checking you out, like I really have a lot of respect for where your head's at in your music. So I just want to say that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Another thing, like on the cover of Roxy, man, who is that fine chick, man, that's dancing, man?
Well, you see, that's Brenda.
I see. No, but you know, it seemed like you were having a pretty good time, you know.
Oh, that wasn't even the best of what I was having.
All right, well.
That was just the album cover shot.
Yeah. All right, and thank you. And also, George, like, I don't know if you remember, but I caught you at Jackson State around 4 years ago with Cannonball, and like you came out the truck with Newton Nuisance, and it was pretty nice. So thank you.
Well, since I won't get the mic, you know, I got three questions. The first question is, you seem very autonomous, which I respect, which is one of your admirable traits. You remind me a lot in that respect of Lennon. So I was just, if you ever thought of, I don't know if that's bad or good.
I didn't hear the first part of it.
Of
so
Lennon, you remind me a lot of John Lennon, in you know, your autonomistic way.
Johnny, yeah.
And second question is, what was your connection with Alice Cooper, if any? Because a lot of rumor has it that you helped expose Alice Cooper.
Well, actually, Alice Cooper hasn't been exposed yet. But we helped the group get their first record contract, and above and beyond that, may the Lord have mercy on your soul.
And the third and final question was, personally, is there any, other than your own, you know, doing what you want to do for music, anything, any way that you feel that you're helping prosperity, or anything you want to do for prosperity by doing your music? That's a little, you know, complex. But I mean,
helping prosperity? I would say that I am helping prosperity in these ways. I employ 7 musicians in the band, and probably about 10 on the road crew, and another 4 or 5 in the office, and I'm making my contribution to prosperity in that regard. Also to the people who sell me the equipment that I have to drag around on the road, the nice people who built the lights and the PA system. I've assisted their prosperity quite a bit over the past few years, to say nothing of the trucking company and the guy who rents us the bus. You know, I'm just doing my part to keep it circulating.
Did you ever consider working with Lennon, or have you tried?
Well, he jammed with us on stage at the Fillmore East at one time. But other than that, no.
Frank? Who's Leonard?
You know, John Leonard from the Beatles.
John Leonard?
You mentioned cover design before, and I just wonder how much you would like, or how much control would you like to have of the cover design? Because I find myself, if I don't know a group that well, I judge a record by the cover.
Everybody does.
And I just wonder how much you feel it's important to influence the way the cover is designed.
Well, there's 2 ways to look at that. One, if you are a person who has an idea about, definite ideas about your music, and definite ideas about how you want that music to appear at first glance to the person who's going to listen to the record. You know what happens when you get an album? You can't see anything but the cover, and you just look at the cover, and you turn it over, and you read it, you know, and that's it. The cover is part of the music. And so if you have a strong concept of what you're doing, you want the cover to be integrated with the music. Now, if you know what you're doing, that's good. If you don't, it'll kill you. because you might want to put something on the cover that would be absolutely repulsive to the person going into the store, you know. Suppose your idea of what the music needed was a glossy 8x10 of the group going like this on the front, you know, and you really felt that that was important to what you were saying. Well, suppose the hip mod young person going to a record store saw that and said, this looks like a Dave Clark 5 record, you know. Well, then you would never get your music across to the public at all. Sometimes a new group, when they do their first album, they have ideas about what the cover should look like, but these ideas are often not related to the realities of life. You know, they want to have gold stamping, embossed cutouts, 5-color reproduction on you know, some weird kind of stock, or else they want to have some kind of an illustration on it that is just going to be far too expensive. Now, Warner Brothers has a new policy that anything above a minimum that they set for cover production has to be paid for by the artist. So I think that straightens a lot of them out right away. Yeah.
I've been collecting a few questions here while I've been waiting, and I have about 5 or so. The first 2 are how come questions. First of all, I've noticed that pre-discrete, when you were in concert, the volume of the concert was substantially different than how it is nowadays. Now it's to the point where discerning between one instrument and the other becomes next to impossible at times, because it becomes so loud that it's hard to tell what's what. And why have you done that?
Well,
I'm sitting there with
let's
rolling papers.
examine what you're saying. First of all, you're saying pre-discrete, that the volume was different, right?
Right.
Okay, pre-discrete, I did not have this PA system. Pre-discrete, I was not working in halls the size of the armory that we worked in last night. And when you go into a hall that's very large, I don't know where you're sitting in the hall. If you're sitting right in front of the PA system, you're in trouble, because it is going to be loud. You're playing in a hall that holds 10,000 people. You got to turn it up so the guy in the back is going to be able to hear it. And the reason that we do things like pan the instruments and spread them out, we run a stereo PA, and it makes it easier for a person sitting like about the middle of the hall to pick out who's playing what and where it's coming from. A lot of people who come right down to the front of the stage can't hear anything, because they're right at ground level. They're hearing all the amplifiers from the stage playing into their face. They can't hear any vocals because they're not in front of the PA stack itself. And they can't hear any of the panning because all they did was come down there in the front to watch. You know, actually the best place to hear the show from is out where the mixer is, right about the middle of the hall.
Well, I was located about that position, and in listening to some of the newer material, I couldn't understand any of the lyrics at all. And that
well, this will happen no matter where you're playing or where you're listening from, because here's what happens psychologically when a person goes to a concert. If we're advertised and it says Frank Zappa, the Mother's Invention, coming to town, go and see the concert, everybody goes, oh yeah, they'll play my favorite song off such and such, you know, and the audience comes in with the expectation that the group is going to be a human jukebox for their older material. And it's been my experience that the minute you play something that everybody recognizes, and they've already heard the words on a record where it's easier to make it out, everybody thinks, well, you know, I know how it's supposed to go, and so they get along with it that way. If you play new material, nobody has ever heard it before, and nobody's got a chance to figure out the words. You know, there's just too much to fathom. Besides the words, you got the music, you got the choreography, whatever else is going on, the lights, it's all distracting. If any of that material had been on a record before, you know, it would have been easier to discern. We have to play new material in concert for 2 reasons. 1, you get tired of playing the old stuff if you go on the road a lot. 2, you need to develop that material for future albums. And I would say that a concert is a good place to develop it. And I try and strike up a balance between stuff that people will recognize when we play a concert and newer things that might surprise them. The other factor is that what we play on stage has got little or nothing to do with what the mixer does sitting out there in the hall. Now, during the sound check in the afternoon, I set up a basic balance of the group for him, set the equalization on the instruments, get the panning set up. But once the show starts, what the audience hears is the result of what that mixer does. Now, prior to this tour, we rehearsed for a month with a mixer named Stefan. and Stefan learned the songs. And the first concert, Stefan got pneumonia, and that was about a week ago, and this guy has walked in with no rehearsal, and he's mixing the show. I don't know what he's doing out there, and the only way that I can check it is by listening to cassettes that we make off the board each night, and if I hear that he's doing something really wrong in terms of a blend, then I tell him about it. But it's hard to make music in a place that's designed for sports, you know. And the PA is not designed to hurt you. It's just designed to fill the room and make it available.
Yeah, I was wondering, a couple questions.
Where are you? Hello.
Hey, yeah, I was wondering, like, on your talks with cheapness and tile floor love, if they're ad-libbed at all, like when you're talking about
they are
penetration.
100% ad-lib. It's as ad-lib as this hootenanny that we're having here.
Yeah, also, did you really steal hubcaps by El Monte Legion Stadium?
No, I never stole hubcaps because I never had a car. And I couldn't see any reason to get down and get my hands dirty with something made out of chrome.
Oh, wow.
But El Monte Legion Stadium, yes, I played there, but the parking lot was not the fun place.
Yeah, when you get a tour together, say you tour a lot, is this your PA or do you run it? And how do you practice? Do you rent a concert hall to practice in to get the mixing down? Do you know the crew?
It's something that you do in gradual stages. First, I bought a building, and then the building has a rehearsal hall in the back that's 60 by 40 feet, and then we set up our PA system inside the building. We own the PA system, and we practice with the PA, not the whole thing because we can't set the whole thing up in there. We set up most of it, and we practice for about a month, roughly 6 hours a day with a dinner break for 5 days a week prior to the starting of the tour. And that's what we do.
Mr. Zappa, is there anything you can do about not playing in places that are built for sports? You know, like playing in concert halls?
Well, we do. You know, we play wherever we're booked in to play, and it's a wide variety of places. Like, for instance, when we go to Boston, we're working a theater that holds about 3,000 people. And a lot of times you go to a college, they stick you into a gym. But the real problem is this, that if you were popular and there's a lot of people want to see what you do, and they all want to see you at the same time, you know, there aren't any places that are big that have good acoustics. I can think of maybe 3 in the United States, just stretching it, that are really big, that have even reasonable acoustics. That's something that maybe you can write to your congressman about and have them legislate it.
Yeah, and a lot of times those places that are built like that are made for concert orchestras and not for electric bands, and they still don't sound right. You get a music hall.
How do you choose people who play on your label, Indiscreet?
Well, I haven't been choosing them. You know, from the time that Bizarre and Straight, which was the first 2 labels that I had, from the time that contract ran out, I sort of decided that I was going to spend my time working on just the Mother stuff rather than producing other acts, because when you produce a record for somebody else, here's what happens. If it doesn't sell, they tell you it's your fault. If it does sell, it's your fault because it didn't sell more, you know, and so you can't win. And when you figure it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months to really do an album right, I don't have 2 or 3 months out of the year to produce somebody else. Last year we toured 7 or 8 months, you know, and the rest of the time I'd sort of like to relax, you know, and part of that time that I'm not on the road has to be devoted to working in the studio with the Mother stuff. So I just have shied away from outside production. And anything that's been on Discreet has been Herb's choice.
Yeah, and what political role do you see your music taking now?
What political role?
Yeah.
I would say that our music is an alternative to a political role. When you consider that most politics in the United States is nothing more than a role, in the sense that a person rolls a drunk.
Yeah, I'd like to know whatever happened to Roy Estrada and Ray Collins.
Ray Collins is currently employed as a carpenter, living at Don Preston's house. He's trying to get a group together. He has been trying to get a group together for quite some time. Roy Estrada is working someplace in Orange County. I think he might be driving a truck or working in a warehouse.
And how come your Uncle Meat movie was never released?
Because nobody believed in it to the point that they put up the money to finish it. And seeing as how I'm not a millionaire, I didn't have the money to do it myself.
And lastly, does Cal Schenkel still do your graphics and albums?
Yes, and matter of fact, the next album is probably Cal's best cover, I think. When you see it, it's called One Size Fits All, and he really... It's real good.
I'd like to address a question to any of the three gentlemen. I'd like to hear your views on the occult and a social theory.
Would you care to rephrase that so that the captain can comprehend it?
Well, most music right now is either, oriented around sex, occult, or social theory, or that's sort of a new movement. Would you like to talk on that a little?
I would say that's a gross oversimplification. So.
Can't get into it. The very same ass that carried man across the deserts of time also gave man the brayless hamburger.
Thank you.
How many say amen to it?
Mr. Zappa?
Yeah, where are you?
Right here.
Hello.
How you doing? I'd like to ask one question about the album We're Only In It For The Money. First of all, did you have a lot of hassles from Capitol Records in releasing that because of the cover? And secondly, are there any weird stories related in the making of it? And thirdly, how's Moon Unit?
Well, I'll go backwards. Moon Unit is fine, Dweezil is fine, Ahmed is fine, Gail is fine, everybody's fine. Now, and now, the story of We're Only In It For The Money. The hassles with the cover were not from Capitol Records, they were from the Beatles themselves, those cute little guys from England. I remember the first time we went to England, I got a phone call from Paul McCartney. He says, would you like to come over and have tea and so forth? And so I discussed this with a number of other people because I was afraid he was going to slip me some acid. And so... I mean, I was afraid I would wind up like that. And so after everybody said, listen... They just told me, well, if you go over there, don't drink anything, you'll be okay. Don't eat nothing, don't drink anything. Somebody comes at you with a needle, run. And so I was supposed to go over there, but then I found out that I had to go to Copenhagen the afternoon. I was supposed to go over to his house. So I remember getting on the phone and talking to him. I said, hello, Paul? Is that you, Paul? Yeah, listen, this is Frank. I can't make it over there today, but I had something I want to discuss with you. We're doing this album that's got a cover that looks sort of like Sgt. Pepper, and I wonder whether there'd be any problems, would you guys complain if we did this cover that was making fun of the Sgt. Pepper album? And it was like, on the other end of the phone, I could see the guy going. And so he finally says, you mean you talk business? And I said, well, I figured it'd be better this way instead of calling up your lawyer. And he says, well, I think that I would have to discuss it with the other members of the group, but our attorneys, I'm sure, would be able to blah, 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 blah. And 11 months later, the album finally came out after going through a bunch of shit with their attorneys and so forth. And there you have it.
Was it worth it?
Sure. That's a good cover. As a matter of fact, I got to tell you one other thing. The place where the cover was printed is called Queens Litho, just outside of New York, and there's this sheet. I wish I still had one of them. I don't know whether you understand about how they print things, but they don't do them one at a time. They gang them up on big sheets of paper, and then they cut them apart. Yeah, well, our covers were so similar, like we were using the exact same color of ink and everything that they were using on their cover, to the point where they were running them on the same sheet, like there are these big sheets like this. The half of it's got the real one on this side and ours on that side, And they're really funny to look at. They make great wallpaper.
Frank?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, how much goddamn longer are you going to be around? I mean, you've been...
Well,
I mean, not that I was just... I don't know, I was just a little disenchanted with this late stuff you've been coming up with. And, I mean, really, I thought that we're only in it for the money was your masterpiece. Maybe you should have quit there.
Yeah?
I mean, I'm not trying... I mean, I'm not trying to demean you.
No.
I think you're the greatest. But, it's, you know...
No, a lot of people
just
say
like
the same
maybe-
thing to me every day, really. That's
Yeah, I figured maybe if it works around a circle, maybe you come up with a masterpiece like that again.
Oh, yeah?
I was
Well,
just
gee, I
like-
hope so. I mean, if there's one thing that I really want to do, it's make you happy with one of my records.
Thanks.
But in answer to your question, I expect to be around for quite some time.
I have a question for Mr. Van Vliet. What are the Drazy hoops?
Yeah, I wanted to know that, too.
Little people with bill caps.
True. I believe it.
So do I.
Directed to all three of you, what do you feel about drugs? Well, no, I always heard those funny commercials about, don't do speed, and Frank was making all sorts of fun of those things, and, I just thought it was a pretty interesting situation. How'd you get into it?
I'm really into Barolo.
Sounds good. How about you, Captain?
It's an Italian wine.
I said
His name.
dope. No, I mean, I think that the egg is nice, and if you do anything to it, it isn't an egg anymore.
Thank you.
I don't like drugs. I don't use drugs. And if you want to use drugs, that's your business. I was asked to make some commercials to try and divert people from the habit of using methadone or other chemicals that jack you up. If somebody came to me and asked me to make some commercials about steering people away from things that jacked you down, I would. All those commercials can do is just express my view about it, but it's your body. You can do whatever you want. I think it's unfortunate that people get arrested for using drugs in a society that is so strenuous that it makes people want to do that. I think that if you want to feel good or if you want to feel nothing, there are other more efficient ways to do that. I mean, for instance, if you were dead, you'd really be just right out there like that. And perhaps for some people, it's just a slower process of suicide. I don't want to recommend meditation or anything because that's highly commercialized these days, but the human mind is a wonderful instrument, and you can direct it any way that you like without the assistance of a guru or any of those little attributes that are going to cost you money. And if you want to feel high all the time, well, just feel high all the time. You really don't need a chemical alteration to do it. That might sound like science fiction, but it really does work. And there you have it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know why the back of the Mother Mania album is all printed in German.
It's a news clipping from a concert that we did in Berlin in 1968.
Thank you.
It tells about this riot that we had there when there were some communists in the audience that tried to start a bunch of trouble.
I was under the impression that you had your leg broken by an irate fan once. Is that true?
Well, it was an irate person. And there were some communists in the audience that tried to start a bunch of trouble.
I was under the impression that you had your leg broken by an irate fan once. Is that true?
Well, it was an irate person. I don't know whether he qualifies as a fan. It was a crazy person who was in the audience at a concert at a place called the Rainbow Theatre in England, 1970 or 71, can't remember. And we had just finished playing our encore. Half the band was already off the stage, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in the bottom of an orchestra pit with a concrete floor, with a broken leg, a broken rib, a hole in my chin, a hole in the back of my head, and my head all the way over on this shoulder. They thought I had a broken neck. About 3,000 or 4,000 people sitting around going, huh? What happened? And, I woke up. I didn't even know that I was on the road, I just woke up. I wondered where I was. I never saw the guy. I wouldn't recognize him if we walked in this room right now. I spent a month in the hospital in England, 9 months in a wheelchair, and a few more months with an orthopedic brace on my leg. I was off the road for the better part of a year. During that period of time while I was in the wheelchair, I produced 4 albums. The albums were just another band from L.A., Grand Wazoo, Waka Jawaka, and Reuben and the Jets for Real. I wrote a Broadway musical. I wrote about 6 orchestra pieces. And when my cast came off, I scratched my leg until all of the werewolf hair disappeared.
Thank you.
You mentioned you don't particularly like to listen to pop music. When you're by yourself, what sort of music do you listen to?
Well, usually what I listen to is road tapes by the Mothers, because I have to go through them. We record all of our concerts, and once I get back off the road, I review that material and see if there's anything worth putting out on an album. And if I have any recreational listening time, I'll listen to rhythm and blues, or I'll listen to orchestra music.
All right, thanks.
And where this hotel, which is built out over the water and advertises that you can fish from your window and supplies equipment to do this in the lobby. A number of rock and roll groups have stayed there, and some straight people as well, and they fished out the window and caught things like octopuses and mud sharks and so on and so forth. And these denizens of the deep were used for erotic procedures on willing participants in the hotel room. And that's what the legend of the mud shark is all about.
What was the collaboration you made some years ago with Zubin Mehta from the Los Angeles Philharmonic?
Well, I had an opportunity to have some scores performed with the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra, and they agreed to sort of a minimal budget for rehearsals, and we had a concert in a place called the Pauley Pavilion, which is a 14,000 or 15,000 capacity basketball arena. Not exactly the place you want to listen to a symphony orchestra, but it was filled to capacity for the concert, and it helped a little bit. And as a matter of fact, I saw Zubin just before we went on this tour. He was picking up some stuff at the airport. He says, "Oh, yeah, I'll call you. We'll have lunch." Well,
that was the last time you'd seen him prior to that time, right?
That's right.
And I wanted to ask you, what do you think that classical music in general, I mean, what comes under the euphemistic phrase of classical music on records could stand a better shot for better sales if there was more exposure, or what? I mean, how could classical records?
Spit it out, Mr. Krantz.
Right. How can I'm trying to rephrase it, restructure it. How do you think classical record sales could be improved in this country?
Well,
right now they're somewhere between 5 and 6%.
Yeah, they're terrible. And the only way that they could be improved is if more people liked that kind of music and bought it. But you have a problem there in that As far as the older classics are concerned, everybody gets a chance to hear those at one time or another, either on a radio station by accident. You're trying to find the one you like, and you hear a classical station. You get a little toot-toot, Beethoven, and you turn by. Or you might, in a music appreciation class in school, be confronted with some duck who wants to play you Peter and the Wolf and tell you that that's what's happening, And so I think that all of that has a tendency to turn people away from orchestra music. And the concerts, if you are ever induced to go see a concert of orchestra music, a young person might be turned away by the fact that you can hardly hear it compared to a rock and roll concert. I've gone to see orchestras and have sat in my seat straining to hear what's going on in the orchestra. Even when they're playing loud, it sounds so teeny-weeny up there compared to rock and roll. And so you're dealing with a generation of people who are accustomed to a higher dB environment, their receptivity is based on whether the music affects their body as well as their ears. And when you can have orchestra music pummeling your chest, then I think that, and providing some sort of glandular stimulation, then the sales for those records are going to go up. The other problem is that the newer serious pieces, I think for the most part, are dreadful, and a lot of the new electronic music is even worse. It's just complete shuck. It's guys who can program a computer, turning over their function to a computer, and trying to convince the record buyer that these numbers that he has pumped into a machine are really worthwhile for listening purposes. I think that the situation in serious music is pretty dreadful, not just from the standpoint of record sales alone, but from a creative standpoint too. There's no sense of humor in it. There's no sex in it. And as you know, without sex, nothing is any fun. So there's no get-off in it. And you have an audience that is highly oriented toward gratification. It's a hedonistic society, so to speak. And so if it can't make you come one way or another, so why should you listen to it?
Well, there's a tremendous wealth, particularly of orchestral literature, of orchestral pieces that a lot of people at this age have, are just totally unfamiliar with, have never had an opportunity to hear, that really would excite them if they had an opportunity to hear them.
Well, maybe it would excite them, and maybe it wouldn't excite them. That's the thing.
Well, but at least they would have an opportunity to make a decision,
Well, that's what lending libraries are for. I think that record libraries or book libraries that have a record division are useful in that regard. If you want to go in and find out what he's talking about in terms of some of these stunning orchestral pieces, I think it'd be worth your time. Go listen to some of it. If you like it, go buy one and keep it for yourself at home so that you can show your friends when they come over that you're really far out and have an orchestra record. I think that it's going to be a long time before the situation improves for orchestra music in the United States. This is an industrial society. The composer has no place in it, and the orchestra has a very tenuous position in it. Anything that resembles culture is sort of shunted off to the side as like some poofter remnant of European culture that was superimposed on us from a long time ago. It doesn't really fit. The concept of a symphony orchestra up alongside of a K-tel record ad on television is just too incongruous. I think that's really where we're at, is K-tel.
Well, yeah.
Are any of your orchestral scores published, or if anyone wanted to perform them, how would they go about doing it?
They're not published, no.
So there'd be no way to get a hold of any?
Orchestral materials can be rented, but the problem of making them available is that since you're dealing on a one-shot basis, the cost of making oscillate copies of a full score and cranking out parts for an orchestra that wants to play it is pretty exorbitant. When a piece of music is published, it's a losing proposition for orchestra music. It's very time-consuming to prepare the materials, and then, once it's in actual print, then the rental fees to orchestras are very small. But if somebody wanted to get a hold of an unpublished score, it's expensive to prepare it.
And would you, or are you planning to do anything again like you did with the L.A. Phil?
We've had maybe 5 or 6 offers from orchestras all over the world since that time, but it always seems like the wrong thing to do, because what they want really is to get the mothers as a rock and roll band to come in and play alongside of the orchestra so that they can improve their concert attendance. And so they use us as bait to bring kids into the concert hall with little or no regard for my music as something for an orchestra to play. And, you know, it's a shuck. And I felt that from what happened with the Los Angeles Philharmonic and have sort of avoided the orchestral experience ever since, because it's disheartening to spend that amount of time writing some music for an orchestra and know that they just don't give a shit when they get the music, and it's just another thing for them to do.
So you have one thing though. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
What's that?
Gregory? Which is slick. There's something that you wrote which is really slick. I don't want to talk about it. Let him talk about it.
Well, some of you might have seen a performance at the Felt Forum in 1972, and I was in there with a 20-piece group, and we played a piece called The Adventures of Gregory Peccary. We played a couple of movements from that, and I finally have recorded that like last December. Went in and got a 20-piece group together and laid that down, did the complete version of it, and it's possible that that may be released in November.
Oh, wow. And that's orchestral.
Yes, right there, please.
Mr. Z, do you have a thing about poodle dogs, and where did you first find your zircon-encrusted tweezers?
Well, the thing about dogs is it's happening on a very rarefied conceptual level. As you'll see, there are references to dogs throughout the work, and the reference to the dog has nothing to do with a dog or the concept of a dog. It's just like, you can think of it as, you know, when Rembrandt did those paintings, to make them all look the same, he'd mix brown with every color, you know, to get that thing. So I said, well, that's a funny idea. I'll stick a little piece of a dog in every record. You see? And so on the next album, the concept of the dog has been brought down to the word arf in 2 songs, and another song called Evelyn the Modified Dog, which is included in there. And, you know, it's just a little bit all the way along. And the zircon-encrusted tweezers I've had for quite some time. The zircons were removed from Terry Wimberly's ring that he got because he thought Fats Domino had one.
I was wondering what you thought about. I have 2 questions. The first one was what you thought about unions, musical unions, whether that was pretty well summed up in Rudy Wants to Buy You a Drink, or, you know, if they're really doing something for the musician. And second of all, how and where is the cheese?
Okay, first about unions. As you know, the concept of a union is a good idea. It's something that was originally thought up, they say, to help people who work stand a better chance of getting good pay and good working conditions, and it's a bargaining co-op that is used for taking a collective group of people in a certain industry, and so they can bargain with the people who run that industry. Well, somewhere along the line it got corrupted, and the unions, especially in regard to the musicians union, don't really do very much for the average guy in the union. Like the LA Musicians Union is a great example. There's 16 or 18,000 people in that union. Out of those 16 or 18,000, maybe there's 1,000 who work all the time. And the business of the union is designed to keep those people at a good level of income because they're the ones that are in the studio. It seems like the union is run by the string players who play the backup dates and all of those Bobby V records and stuff, you know. It just got that whole kind of aura to it. And recently there was a scandal that ripped through the union where they discovered that $2 million had disappeared out of the treasury. And as a result of that disappearance, the union had to shut down 2 days a week. They couldn't even keep their doors open to cash people's checks. You know, it's that kind of a sleazy thing. And so I personally don't have too much respect for the musicians union from the experience that I've had with Local 47. And I think that that it doesn't really do that much for the average guy who is playing in a group, except to make his life miserable, taking tax away from him and making things inconvenient. It does not do very much to improve the lot of a person playing rock and roll music, unless you happen to be a violin player backing up one of those sessions. And your question about the cheese is she's had 3 automobile accidents, mostly head injuries, and she's probably still living in England.
Do you think the musicians' unions lack clout because they just are not as powerful as, say, the Teamsters Union? Or is it just mostly you feel their own fault?
I think that what happens with a musicians' union is there's some guys in there who are very interested in taking home a good paycheck for themselves as union officials, and they don't care anything about musicians, and it's all a bunch of jive.
Okay. Yes, right there.
Yeah, could you tell me a little bit about Lord Buckley, if you have anything else coming out on him or anything like
No,
that?
I don't. Those were masters that were made available for just one album.
Yes, right there.
I'd like to ask Frank if his new album is going to be basically an instrumental album or vocal album or a combination of both.
There's only one instrumental piece on the album, and it's 2 minutes and 38 seconds long.
Thank you.
It's right there.
Frank, I was curious to know whether or not you were pissed off last night.
Pissed off?
Yeah, so to speak, at the small crowd, the acoustics, everything in general. It seemed like you weren't into it, and then at the end you came out. I've seen you a few times, and I'm listening to music like back since Reuben and the Jets. And last night, like when you came out and did Willie the Pimp, you ran through it, and you just ran off stage, and that was it. The lights were on, and the show was over. I mean, was the curfew 11 o'clock? And even so, were you pissed off?
Well, I'm sure the curfew was 11 o'clock because there was a guy on the side of the stage giving me a 10-minute warning signal, so I don't know what the exact
Yeah, you finished
moment
at 10
was.
to approximately.
At 10 to 11?
Yeah.
Okay, so that got him in without having any overtime. So now the promoter likes me. But as far as being pissed off, I would say that from the moment that I went on stage last night to the time I got off, I couldn't hear hardly anything that I was doing. If I was singing, I couldn't hear my voice coming out of the monitors. Couldn't hear any drums to find out where a beat was, and that's a very hard hall to work in. Just the physics of that hall have never been a fun place to work, and I think it's about the third time that I've played there.
Can I ask you another question?
What's that?
Could you explain 200 Motels to me?
Can I what? Explain
200 Motels, yeah.
What? What part of it?
Well, I saw it and I was pretty high, and I expected to get a lot out of it. I was pretty much,
well, that's the
I was
problem.
lost. I saw Yellow Submarine, I dug that,
Yeah,
at
well,
the
you know,
time.
that was a Beatles movie.
Oh, yeah. No, really.
Well, really, that's about what it comes down to, but as far as coming in and being high and trying to get a lot out of 200 Motels, go in and see it without being high and try and figure out what's going on. I think that you'll have a better experience with it.
You're not going to try to explain it then?
Well, you asked me something specific, a detail about
Something specific. Well, what was the point of putting out 200 Motels?
Well, you see, I had this story and a concept of doing a surrealistic documentary on a group. A surrealistic documentary is something that takes actual events, paraphrases those events, and codifies those events to shrink them down to a size and a shape that people are going to be able to comprehend. However, I failed miserably in your case. And but the basic idea was to give a glimpse of what goes on inside of a band on the road in abstract concept kind of terms. I mean, the events that are referred to in that film literally did happen. There's a lot of stuff in there that's so true that it'd be too disgusting to even talk about it.
Frank, you had you did a concert out at Geneva College last year, or at Hobart College in Geneva.
Yeah.
And you spent the whole time during the concert cutting down college students. And even on some of your albums, you talk about how ridiculous it is to go to college.
Well, first of all, I take exception to your claim that I spent the whole time cutting down college students.
Okay, most of the time.
No, I wouldn't even say that. First of all, I have better things to do than cut down college students.
Well,
I don't know why that you would presume that I do that. I will say this about school, though, and college in particular, that I'm not particularly fond of it. I went to one semester of junior college, and I went there for the express reason of getting some pussy, and I got some, and I got out of school. I've never... Oh, Don wants to say something.
If you want to be a different fish, you have to jump out of the school.
That was my question, thank you.
But as far as my view of the educational process, I would like it a lot if I felt for a moment, and I'm talking about my experience, and it's been a long time since I was in the school, I felt that they weren't teaching me anything, they were wasting my time, and I just resented it, and I was more than happy to get out.
Do you think that can be applied to schools as a whole? I mean, do you think that can be applied to all of us too?
Well, I don't think that I'm qualified to say that because I don't attend this school, and I don't know whether they do anything to teach you anything here, or what your motives are in going to the school, because a lot depends on whether you want to learn something or whether you're going to go to school like I did, and go to college just to get some pussy, But I think that that is, yeah, let's get some pussy, yes. But look, let's face it, if you want to get along in this world, you got to learn something. The only trouble is that what you need to survive is generally not presented in a school. You can get it easier out in the street, and that's where I got mine.
Okay,
and it was cheap, too.
You were saying earlier about before you start a tour that you practice for about a month, and it's memory exercises.
Mhm.
In a show like last night, aside from the time given to the individual musicians to improvise, can you change the order of songs? Because like from when you first came on, it was about an hour and a half before the music really stopped at all.
Yeah, you can change the order of songs.
So you're not really restricted to the same show every night in the exact order, because it seemed like one tight-knit unit, and I guess.
You can change the order of the songs at will, because there are ways of giving cues at the end of one song to indicate what the next tune is going to be.
Right. And one other thing, could you give me a hint at where Eric Clapton plays on We're Only In It For The Money?
He does not play, he only talks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, in a way I can see what you're saying about school. You're a self-made man, in a lot of ways, no bullshit. Right now I'm in a school of music and I'm taking like composition, and I feel right now that it is trying to helping me get my thing together, because I don't think I could have done it by myself, just by books. I'm not that brilliant,
Well, when I talk about school, you got to understand that where I went to school and when it was. You see, I'm 34 years old, and I graduated from high school in 1958, and I'm sure that in that 20 years or whatever it's been, that there have been some improvements made in school. But when I wanted to find out about composition, there wasn't anybody to tell me about it. And the best they could do was say, well, if you'll go to the library and get this book and study from this book. And I said, well, I don't need this guy to tell me to go to the library. And that's why I got out. I just went to the library, and I learned off books and records. See,
Yeah.
So, and it just left a bad feeling with me about what school was all about, So if the composition class is helping you here, well, you sure got lucky.
Yeah, it is kind of. But another thing, you do, like, obviously, like, I saw, like, your scores, like the one book you have out. And, obviously, like, like, all your part writing rules and all your shit, And you did learn it yourself, right? You just basically got it together. All right, thank you.
Yeah, let me say one thing about school. This is kind of interesting because I went to a music school, San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and I used to play, I used to like to practice right after I leave these harmony classes and all that. And I did learn something, but I used to play these seventh chords. I don't want to get too technical, but I used to have these little teachers who used to come over and knock on the door saying, "You can't do that. Get out of here. You're playing that evil music. Get out." And it was really weird. But now, like at that very same school, I taught a class there, so things have changed in a jazz class or improvisation class. So I think things are getting better.
There's another thing about music education. Up until recently, the process of live performance was de-emphasized in a music curriculum. They figure that if you're going to study music, that they should go at it from a very academic point of view. Well, I can't imagine a bigger mistake in teaching somebody and playing down live performance. If you can't play, unless you become a teacher, you have no way to earn a living. So I think a music class, if it's going to be well-rounded, has to not only teach you the technical skills that you need to make music, but it should make you aware of things like what a contract is supposed to say and what can happen to you if you sign the wrong kind of a thing, what to look out for when you're doing business with a club owner, what to say if the guy tells you, well, I'm sorry, we can't pay you tonight. And, you know, getting groups together, well, people have some experience in group performance, so that you're not a complete dummy when you get out of school, and the only thing you can do is become a teacher to crank out more dummies.
Yes, right over here, please.
I have a question for George. I was wondering how much the synthesizer and use of it in both jazz and rock music has changed your attitudes, and whereas it used to be sort of unique a few years ago, it's really sort of everyone's got one now, whether they can play it or not, and whether you think that it's just becoming a normal part of the musician's repertoire, you know, as far as equipment is concerned, or it's really still in a process where you can be inventive with it and you can play around with it and do things that haven't been done before.
Well, yeah, I think you can do things and with it that haven't been done before, but certain music, it depends on who's playing it and the musicianship involved and what their intentions are. Because some musicians just put it up there because they say, hey, that looks good. And they can only do one thing with it because they haven't delved into it. And actually, you know what I mean? They say, well, I got one sound, and they stay there, and they don't do nothing else with it, you know. But Frank was the first person that said, hey, man, you ought to start playing synthesizer. And I said, oh, man. You know, because all I'd heard was, you know, I took a synthesizer class at school, and I said, But I got into it, and, you know, I talked to Don Preston about it. And he says, yeah, man, there's some things you can do with it. So I got into it, and I began to like it, and I began to humanize it for me. The whole point of playing synthesizer to me was to make it sound like it was coming from me. You know, not like it was coming from somebody else or a machine.
Oh, Frank, how about with a guitar synthesizer? Or I was reading about some kind of guitar where 3 of the strings could represent 3 different instruments, and use the rest as a guitar or something like that.
Yes, I've played such a device, yes.
And how is that going to become popular, or?
I'm sure it will one day, but there's a lot of technical things wrong with it, and it's not my idea of a good time.
And, well, would you rather play just a regular, guitar with whatever effect, the so-called normal effects now, or do you enjoy or get some satisfaction out of adding on all the other effects that a synthesizer would add to it?
Well, if they didn't get in the way of my playing, you see, the problem with that device is that there is anywhere up to an 80 millisecond delay from the time that you hit the string to the time that the synthesized note comes out. And that don't mean too much to most of you here, but if you're playing fast and you got to wait 80 milliseconds for the note to come out that you just played, you're in trouble. And besides, when you start hearing if you've been playing guitar for a while and you hit a string and you know what it's supposed to sound like and what it's supposed to feel like, because you feel it coming back through your body, it's conducted through your hands back to your body when the string hits, and you link up with the instrument, and suddenly you hit your string and a trumpet comes out. It feels really weird.
Right in front of him, the gentleman on the next row.
Have you ever had to go long periods of time for the inspiration to write or compose music, or is this something that you could do constantly?
Well, actually, the way I'm working right now is I only write a short period of time out of the year. I mean, actually sit down at a desk and do it, and the rest of the time I've learned to develop a process where I store impressions and get ideas for things and hang on to them until my schedule says, write, Frank. And then I just dump it out that time, and then the next part of the schedule is I have to teach it to the other people who are going to play it. The next part of the schedule is you record it. The next part of the schedule is you rehearse it all over again and learn it for the road. The next part of the schedule is you go out and play it, and then it's a cycle like that. It's just my time is planned at least a year in advance for how things are going to go and what kind of time slots I'm going to be able to put things into. And so as far as the inspiration for things to write, I'm picking a few up right now, see? So it doesn't stop. It's just when you actually put it down on paper, it could be a very short period of time, and then you do a lot of it.
There was a young lady over here, please. Would you just wait one second, please, for the mic? Thank you.
Um,
Um?
I don't like it.
Well, could you use it anyway? Thanks. Okay. He's punishing you.
The
Punishing you.
I know.
Use this.
I have an English question I'd like you to answer. It goes, the artist as a responsible individual, responsible to himself and to no one else, is a new concept. Its Bible in English is Shelley's Defense of Poetry. Now, this is something I have to write. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the artist as
The artist responsible to no one else other than himself? Well, I think that that's a little bit presumptuous in an era of mass media, because these days, if a person is an artist and if a lot of people like his work, then suddenly he opens his mouth and goes gaga, and somebody writes it down and somebody else reads it, and that affects their life. And you can't really take such an isolationist viewpoint anymore with information being transmitted so fast and say, yeah, I'm the only thing that matters, because I have to be careful of what I say, because I don't want to, by proxy, induce somebody to do something that I would feel harmful or counterproductive to our society in general. That's the way I look at it, and I take a responsibility for my activities in my private life. But as far as what I do in writing music, I don't see, in terms of instrumental music, how what I'm going to write is going to hurt anybody outside of maybe their mouth when they try to play it. So I just do whatever I want.
Two questions. First, on what you said before. What do you say to a club owner when he says, we can't pay you tonight?
Tell him to step outside.
Okay, this is a little more interesting one. Like, there seems to be, like, a problem, like, when you play at a place like the War Memorial, right?
Yeah.
Like, the audience, right, doesn't get off on you, and, like, you obviously can't get off on it. Like, at the very end, you said, I'm not talking acoustics either.
Yeah.
Like, at the very end, you said, okay, here's one you recognize, right? So you have to play that. I mean,
Right.
obviously, that's a bore. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say that it's a bore, but it's a situation where if we didn't play that song, most of the people in that audience would have been disappointed that we didn't play it. And if we do play it, somebody thinks that it's a bore because we played it. I happen to enjoy playing it.
Right, but like your thing, shouldn't that be like the responsibility is the artist thing? You know?
What?
I mean, like to play in the War Memorial. I mean, to attract people that that are interested in your simpler side. I mean, why are you interested in maintaining such an audience? I mean, is it for monetary gain? Perhaps. I mean, you just need that money for production. You know, I mean.
No, it's not it at all. First of all, people come to see us for a number of different reasons, and many of those reasons have nothing to do with music, simple or otherwise. A lot of times, especially when we work at college, an isolated college, we have a situation where the person has bought the ticket at the beginning of the school year as part of a student body contribution or something like that, and we could be anybody coming there, and they're coming to the concert because they already paid for it. So we are a social event that allows people to get together. That a lot of people come, they don't even know who we are, what we play. It doesn't make any difference to them. That's one aspect of it.
Yeah, you should not have any responsibility to that, right?
But the fact of the matter is, I like to play music. And somewhere along the line, some people have supposed that everything I like to do has to be so ugly that only a very few people will want to listen to it. I happen to like to play Willie the Pimp because I like to play the guitar. And because of my limitations on that instrument and the fact that I'm not too jazz enthused with a lot of chord changes, I like to play a simple,
But why in
monotonous-
the War Memorial?
Oh, the War Memorial? Somebody booked us in there. That's it. Simple
I
as
mean,
that.
so why don't you say, well, I don't want to play there? I mean,
You know, you don't always get your choice. You know,
There's no other hall around here anywhere.
I don't even know whether there is another hall in this town. I don't know anything about Syracuse. I don't know anything about Albany. I live in California. I have a guy who books tours for me. He puts me into places where other groups play. You know, that's it.
but it's such a it's a much smaller event. Like
What?
The event is much less important, right? I mean, when there is all these primarily the acoustic problems, I guess. You know, I mean that you can't be really on.
All I'm saying is simply this. You do not always get to choose where you get to play. And if people want to see you, you do the best you can by playing wherever they stick you. You know, I've played, I'll tell you a bad hall, the Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center. I think that's a terrible hall, you know. People would say, oh, that's a real nice run. It's as hard to hear on that stage as it is at the War Memorial, you know. And so you can't even guess sometimes. I mean,
of course, they've had acoustic problems. I mean, they've had problems with that hall ever since it was built.
Then why don't they do something about it?
Yeah, well, they suggested dynamite, you know.
That's a nice idea.
I don't know of any hall today that's made for acoustic for electric instruments. That's designed specifically with that in mind. You know, most of the music halls are designed for acoustic instruments.
Yeah, the requirements are different. If you have an orchestra or a dance band of the old school that's playing in a hall, and they're not really going to use any amplification other than a little PA for the MC to announce the tunes, a hall like the War Memorial would probably be okay because it's resonant and it'll make acoustic instruments sound out more. But the minute that you amplify something and increase the velocity of that sound whizzing through the air and get a room with that much concrete in it, it's just going to bounce all over the place. And at the time most of those halls were built, nobody even imagined large attendance rock and roll concerts happening at 130 dB in their place. I mean, it was originally built for a completely different purpose. And it's not just that hall, but 80% of the halls that you work at in the United States.
But, by the way, I read recently where Avery Fisher Hall is going to be closed down for about 6 months, either this year or next, in order to completely redo the interior.
The acoustics?
For the acoustics. They've already spent about $20 million on the acoustics since 1963, and the building originally went up, and the building itself only cost $8 million to begin with, you know. Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes.
Frank, I was wondering, for your particular taste, what guitars and strings and wah-wahs and amps do you like to use? And also, I was wondering how you got the tape effects for that song you did on Apostrophe called Montana. And I wanted to know if George would be able to go through some of the basic principles of oscillation and modulation and synthesizer.
Huh?
I didn't hear it.
I wanted to know what type of guitars, wah-wahs, strings, and amps do you like to play out of?
Okay,
And
what I'm using on stage right now is a customized Gibson SG with a mixed set of strings. The top string is a 009 Ampeg string. The B string is a Gibson E string. Wow. And the G string is an Ernie Ball 15. And the D string is a Rickenbacker D string. And the A string is a Rickenbacker E string. And the low E string is a Gibson 340 A string. And
I was wondering how you got the tape effects for Montana.
The what?
The tape effects, the voice for Montana. That song on
There is
Apostrophe.
no tape effect on Montana.
For the voices, the vocals.
What about it? Montana doesn't have any tape effect on the voice.
Well, the vocals, they seemed really freaked out like they were
Oh, you
yours,
mean
but-
the ones that are speeded up?
Right. and
Oh, yeah.
I was
All you
wondering
do, the way you do that is you take the master tape and you slow it down a minor third, and the girls sing on it here, and then when you play it back to normal speed, the track is normal speed, and the voices are speeded up. They do it with a device called a VSO, variable speed oscillator.
Did you do that yourself, or did someone else do that?
I did it. I even turned the knob on the oscillator myself.
I want to thank you, Mr. Zappa, for coming today very
All
much.
right, Mr. Krantz.
And along with you two gentlemen, too, from the mothers. Okay, thank you.
If that guy with the broken leg will wait there, I'll sign his cast.
Great. Thank you very much.